got a good turnout here tonight for a broadening out of that campaign. I think the people who came to the No Household Tax campaign came to it from a lot of different points of view. We had all a lot of different grievances, and one of the key slogans of the No Household Tax campaign is "Enough is enough," which indicates that we're not a one-issue or even a three-issue campaign, that is household, water and septic tank taxes. I wasn't particularly surprised to find that immediately we crossed the threshold of the 31st of March, people were straight into supporting campaigning against the treaty, against the EU treaty. It gives me great pleasure to welcome here tonight Ben Gilroy, who is prominent in working on other aspects of the various grievances and difficulties that this country faces, and working in particular on solutions, as well as he said this morning, as moaning about the problems, he's offering solutions, and I hope to hear a lot more about that tonight. I knew nothing of Ben, or very little of Ben, until Paul Byrne here from Auckland drew him to our attention a few weeks ago. I've since learned a bit more, and I hope we all learn a good bit more about him tonight. But in the meantime, I'll just hand over to Paul Byrne, who will introduce Ben to you.
How are you doing? Thanks for coming tonight. It's a great turnout. Just very briefly, I'm a member of a group called Awaken Ireland, which is just a new group that's formed. And it's formed out of a call that was put out for people to attend a conference down at the Boghill Centre in Clare. The purpose of that was, it was called Ireland's Future, People's Forum, and the purpose of it was to get people together and initiate conversation to go, where are we going with this country? If we had a clean slate, what would we do, and what are the solutions? Because the solutions to the very big mess that this country is in will have to come from the people, from all of you, from all of us together. We don't want somebody coming in from an outside country telling us what to do anymore. We have enough ability in this country to come up with our own solution and make this country what it can be, and it can be amazing. And that's the perspective of Awaken Ireland. And say it's only a new movement, and what we want to do is go into communities and connect existing groups. Like, that's why I came to Carmel and Coleman, because I knew that they'd organised the household charge very well, you know, a group to resist, which is all use, and well done. So to contact your group and to start connecting them with the like of Ben's group, with our group, and all these other groups who are pulling in the same direction. So that's why this meeting's come about. And what I'd like to do, if you're interested, is after this meeting, we're going to hear Ben and John and Claire here talk, and they've got great information. I've heard their talk so far, and it's great to have them down. In the following weeks, we can arrange to have other people come down and speak as well on things like alternative currencies, you know, solutions to the problems in various different ways. So what we'd like to do is have this as the first of a series of similar meetings. So I won't waffle on anymore. I'll introduce you straight to John and Ben. Ben Gilroy is going to speak here first.
Can I interrupt briefly? I forgot to make.
I thought there was an objection already.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I could receivers or anything, if you can get it. When they come, we just video as happens, and unfortunately, if they don't like it, they shouldn't be doing the job. So the country's in an awful mess. I don't know if anybody knows that World War III has already started. We thought we were going to have bombs and guns and everything. But I think they told us it would be on computers. And that's exactly the way World War III is after starting. The Germans are here, the Chinese are coming, and World War III has started. And none of us noticed. So maybe there's too much fluoride in the water or something, or a little bit of sleep on it. But where did the mess begin? Where did the mess begin? Because the government says we were to blame. And I suppose, you know, maybe we're partially to blame, because we allowed the government do things that they weren't voted in to do. And then the new government that went in with promises of stuff that they weren't going to do. And we accept that for politics. Everybody says to me, but Ben, politicians always lie. And I go, like, you know, on such issues of what they lied about with the bondholders and stuff like that, that has the country ruined. And I wish it was highlighted more about how many evictions there are a day. Because in the courts at the minute it's 14 a day. I mean, that's huge, 14 a day. Now the reason I call them evictions is because the courts force the houses from the people. And because it's not always a sheriff arriving and dragging the family out, See, the family go to court and they're in fear, so they just hand the keys back. See, that's the problem. I met a man from Monaghan, and he's due to be evicted soon. So we'll be up there with the cameras because he ain't leaving his house, and the sheriff will be coming, so we'll have another video. But the problem I find with this is that Irish people in general want to own their homes. We're different than the rest of Europe. We want to own our homes. It's just the way we are. And most people that I know who went for a mortgage went with the honest intent of paying it back. I mean, that's a fair statement. The banks, what they've done, they overvalued everything, and they created the bubble and then they busted. And when they did that, we were forced to bail them out. We didn't have a say in it. We were forced to bail them out. And this leads then to austerity measures like household tax. I don't know, can I just get a show of hands how many people paid that household tax? I have a feeling you didn't. But you did you? Yeah?
Well, I think I did, but I didn't like the form, so I didn't fill it in exactly correctly, so that admitted receiving it, but refused to cash my cheque, so I don't know where I stand.
Oh, that's okay. You stand quite well. So the rest of you are criminals. But that's what the government has done to you. They've actually made you criminals. I mean, how dare they? They have made more than 1 million households criminals. Now, 1 million households, is obviously more than half the country because there's more than one person in the household. And we're criminals. Right? And I'm thinking, okay. So I'm looking at banking laws. And did you know that there was serious liquidity banking laws in place in this country? I know you probably didn't because you wouldn't imagine there was. A liquidity law in just layman terms is the banks must stay liquid, must keep cash on the shelf. So any bank that received a bailout broke liquidity laws. And people say to me, well, how serious were the liquidity laws? And I say, well, they carry 5 years in jail. So you're all criminals because you're not picking up the tab, or at least you've refused to pay one more tab. I mean, you actually have picked up a lot of tabs that you haven't noticed. You'll notice them at the fuel pumps, and you'll notice them in cuts all around. And God forbid you have to go to hospital, you'll notice the cuts. I mean, we've the worst hospitals in Europe, if not the world now. It's not good enough for the money we spend on it. It's not like we didn't spend money on it. We spent money on it. So, these laws that have us in trouble and have us criminalised, that's why I go to people who ring me for help, when the sheriff is coming. And I know people maybe don't get as emotive about the receiver coming for business because we kind of think, oh, well, they have a business, But that man's livelihood is still in his business. Why should he be dragged out of his business by the illegal activities of the bank? It doesn't matter if you've been dragged out of your home or your business. Because if he's dragged out of his business, quite shortly after that he'll be dragged out of his home because he can't pay the mortgage then. And the rates have gone up for business people as well. We have a number of businesses in Trim who approached us, and they have a number of businesses either side of them closed, and the rates are still up and the footfall is down and there's no money to spend. I mean, it's just not a good plan for the future. So, back to the liquidity laws then. I haven't seen any banker in this country put in jail yet for the serious laws. Yet we're all threatened as being criminals and fines, and we'll even change the law to come after you. In other words, there was laws on data protection, and they said they'll go to the ESB to get your details to find out who didn't pay. And even though that's illegal, our government, instead of doing what the people want, they said, no, we'll actually change the law so we can get the information to criminalise you. I mean, was that on their manifesto when we voted for them? Would we have voted for that? So I want to show you this chap that I met while we were talking about banking laws, and he's a German, and he was part of the trouble, if you like, but you can just stop it there for 1 second. He was sort of part of the trouble, but then came good, because he was headhunted from Germany by an Italian bank, but to work in the IFSC here in Dublin. And when I met him, we went for a walk around the IFSC, and he showed me all the different banks. And the regulator is the guy who should have been... My apologies. The regulator is the guy who we were paying to make sure about liquidity laws, because I'm an electrician and I'm not supposed to know anything about liquidity laws, and Johnny's a plasterer and he doesn't know much about liquidity laws, I know for sure. So we had a regulator that we paid very well to protect the country's assets and banking in policing the banks. And rather than doing his job, he fell asleep at the wheel. And apparently you could wine and dine. This top German banker telling me this. It was a well-known fact in the IFSC that you could wine and dine the regulator and get a banking license. And I said to him, why would anyone want a banking license? And he said, well, if you open a bank in the IFSC, you can trade illegally with money you don't have. I mean, this is what was going on. So that's why you had Pfizer. I don't know if anyone knows that medical company, the male pill people, I'm sure men here don't know it, but they have a bank in Dublin, Pfizer Bank. If you Hewlett Packard, HP Bank. These are all friends of the global elite down there that got banking licenses. Porsche cars, with Porsche Bank down there. Yes, you have all these people who got banking licenses down there. So I'm going to play you a little clip. Now this is a clip from a program that went out in Australia. Okay? So remember, in Australia these people know this. In New York the people know this. The New York Times called Dublin the Wild West of banking. Okay? And yet when the regulator was here, he was paid big money. So I'll give you a look at just this program that went out in Australia. And the German guy is Jonathan Sugarman from UniCredit.
So much of what happens on Wall Street is felt across the globe. Investors take their lead from this financial hub. Now people angry about banks and bankers are doing the same.
Occupy Wall Street under occupation. People arriving from everywhere.
The Occupy movement has spread to London, to Rome, and here to downtown Dublin.
We have probably in the region of 60 to 70 people who are sleeping here and hundreds of people who are coming by every day.
Jonathan Sugarman isn't the kind of person you expect to meet at a rally against economic inequality.
Hey, well done everybody.
After all, he was a big city banker, the very breed of 21st century capitalist who's brought thousands of people onto the streets all over the world.
The banks have all been nationalised because they ran out of money.
But this insider is now as appalled as anyone here about a system that's making the poor pay for the mistakes of the rich.
You have hospital wards shutting down, you have schools shutting down, you have public services that are now being curtailed because there's no money. The money's gone to the banks. Your money, my money, everyone's money has gone to the banks. What we need is for the regulation that exists to be enforced.
Jonathan Sugarman has never spoken publicly about his experiences until now. In 2007, he became a very senior executive at UniCredit, Italy's biggest bank, one of the top 5 banks in Europe. He was the head of risk management in Ireland.
As a bank, we have a license to operate as a bank, which is very much like a driving license. It says this is the speed you can go, this is what you can do, and you have to operate within these limits. And it was my job to make sure that that was done every day.
Jonathan Sugarman monitored the back office, the people responsible for checking the trades and the traders out front. He soon realised the numbers weren't adding up. He suspected his bank was breaching strict rules over how much cash and assets it's required to hold in reserve.
And I insisted that we notified the regulator immediately, which is precisely what we are required under the terms of our licence and under Irish law to do.
How certain are you that UniCredit broke the law while you were there?
100% certain. And to use the Irish expression, to be sure, that is why I brought in this London-based IT company, which had a very good reputation in Dublin, and the result was pretty horrific, because whereas the breach that I reported to the regulator was a breach of 20%, whereas the permissible deviation was 1%, they rang me up one evening, soon after they tied into our systems, linked into our systems, and said, your breach is actually 40%.
When he raised the alarm with his chief executive, the response was dismissive. It was a systems error. The risk manager was instructed to continue approving the deals. Jonathan Sugarman was in the thick of a reckless banking culture that was on a collision course with disaster.
Well, on the days that the system threw up these figures that I was told were incorrect, we would sign to say, oh, this is a system error and we're confident that everything's all right, and just carry on as we did before, never notified anyone. So when you think of the fact that when Nick Leeson brought down Barings Bank, it collapsed over £800 million, I was signing over 5 billion every day that we didn't have.
Understanding the dictionary definition of the word and the fact that I spent 4.5 years in prison, I am a criminal. I always knew what I was doing was wrong. Did I think it was criminal from inception? Absolutely not.
It's been 16 years since Nick Leeson single-handedly brought down Britain's oldest bank, Barings. It was such a spectacular, audacious, outrageous act of financial skullduggery, Hollywood made a movie about it.
I mean, success was the thing that I always wanted, and you know, conversely, my biggest fear was the fear of failure, and the fear of failure was probably the one thing that I couldn't countenance. So putting my hand up and saying, look, there's this error.
Grant. So you can see him talking there about if the regulations in force were dealt with, that wouldn't have been allowed to happen. Now imagine he was doing 5 billion a day that they didn't have. 5 billion a day. No wonder the country's bankrupt. He said they were in the worst bank there. There was a bank called Daphne Bank. Anybody heard of that bank, Daphne Bank? No. That's a German bank. That was the biggest bank in Ireland for the last 10 years. And no Irish person, but very few Irish people have actually heard of it, Daphne Bank. And apparently it was left holding 112 million, and Angela Merkel wants it back. And that's what she told the government in no uncertain terms. And that's why they do our budget. And our our elected officials are dancing to that tune. So when you see the Troika coming into town, they were behind all this. They knew this was going on. Every one of them knew it was going on. The Troika are the European banks. They are the people that were in the IFSC. They are the guilty party here, not the Irish people. Most Irish people didn't deal with UniCredit, or didn't deal with Daphne Bank, or any of the other banks down there. Most of us just dealt with our own sort of Bank of Ireland and AIBs and what have you. These were big boys playing the big games gambling with money they didn't have, and our Irish government has said, don't worry, the Irish clowns will bail you out. And why shouldn't we? I mean, who are we? Who are we not to pay them out? They're these big guys in suits. We're peasants. So we should work and bail these guys out. That seems fair, doesn't it? Not a good political rally, I understand. It wouldn't get me voted, but it's what happened. Now, the trouble with the demographics of this was that at the time this happened, Fianna Fáil were actually dying anyway. I mean, they were dead man walking when this was happening. And I firmly believe we would have been like the Greeks. We might have actually taken to the streets when we realised that not only would we pay back this debt, but our children would pay it back. And maybe even our children's children. We don't know. And what I dislike hugely is the way our Irish government treats us then. I mean, they actually had the audacity to say to us things like, well, we don't know who the bondholders are. Now, please, please don't treat me like a clown altogether. I might not understand the liquidity laws, and I might not know too much about banking. But please don't tell me you don't know who you're paying the sovereign money of this country back to. Because if you don't know who they are, just stop paying, right? And that would make sense. And then whoever shows up at the door and has a genuine bill, then maybe pay him, if it's a genuine bill. But to treat us like complete idiots and say we don't know who they are, I find very insulting. So what we decided to do was, with our German banking friend here, we said, what's the chance of getting the list of the bondholders? And he said, I'll get it for you tomorrow. So we got the list, and I gave it to Claire Daly, because she was going on Vincent Browne. And when she went on Vincent Browne, the minister was on, I think it was Coveney, and he was on that night, and he said, well, I don't know who the bondholders are. And Vincent Browne says, well, let me read them out to you then. And he started just to read them out. And then Coveney says, well, I didn't know who they were, I'll have to research. And he said, well, would you like a copy of this and bring it back to Enda Kenny, and maybe you can now figure around the table what you're going to do. And he said, this is no laughing matter. And then Vincent Browne said to me, you're right, it's no laughing matter. You treating the Irish people like this, like they're complete Egypts. And it's a video on YouTube you should watch if you missed that Vincent Browne show. And it really will show you how they treat us. Now, I don't know if you remember when they were getting into government and Fianna Fáil was dead man walking. The reason we didn't take to the streets was that government in waiting at the time were saying all the right things. See, so there was no need for Irish people to take to the street, because they were saying things like, oh, we won't pay back the bondholders, and what a disgrace it is. So I'll give you just a little reminder of that, because it's hard to believe how we forget this sort of stuff. So let me just give you a little reminder. Hold on now. They introduced harsh budgets for the fiscal policies. But now what he's doing is he's introducing household tax and water tax, and it doesn't matter what you call these taxes. If I call it the paying back gamblers' debt tax, that's what it is. And make no mistake, that's what it is. And I'll just give you, it's not that he didn't fully grasp it, because he actually says it better than I can in this one. And I don't mean to keep harping on him, but he is the Minister of Finance. They stand over it. I mean, it's really hard to believe that that's what these guys were saying just before they got into power. I mean, that's why I play this, because while I don't mean to keep harping on, and maybe things were worse than he thought they were when he got in, but you can't come out with these speeches and then treat us like that when you get into power. You at least have to come out and say, look, it's worse than I thought, or put the cards on the table, or whatever it is. But instead to treat us like we're idiots and start introducing all these taxes, and it's just disastrous, and that's what we vote for. So that's why I say maybe it is partly our blame, because we voted for these people. That's who we voted for. And this is the way they treat us. So we don't have democracy in this country. You know, what we have is a vote. We have one vote every 4 to 5 years, and that's it. And it doesn't matter what we vote for. You've seen the promises these guys made. It doesn't matter what they promise. They still do whatever it is you want. So Tweedledum goes out and Tweedledee comes in, and it makes no difference. And if Tweedledum comes back in again, it doesn't matter what they say to you. It's exactly the same thing. There's two lads in Australia who are kind of experts in the European law. And I just want to show you, they're quite good at explaining it, but it's just to show you how outside of Europe people see us, because I told you this programme went out in Australia with the bankers. So here's two guys from Australia that explain quite well what the story is here with Europe.
Roger, yes?
Roger.
That's your name?
Roger.
Good. And what do you do, Roger?
I'm a financial consultant.
Financial consultant, eh?
Roger,
yeah,
yes.
Terrific. And Roger, how's business at the moment?
Not bad, thank you. Been a bit quiet lately.
How do you mean lately?
Since the war, been a bit quiet.
Fair enough. Okay, Roger, your special subject tonight is the economies of the European community. Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
How much does Greece owe, Roger?
$367 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Mostly to the other European economies.
Correct. How much does Ireland owe?
$865 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Other European economies, mostly.
Correct. How much does Spain and Italy owe?
$1 trillion each.
Correct. Who to?
Mainly France, Britain and Germany.
Correct. And how are Germany, France and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke economy can't pay it back?
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it, they're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct. And very well done. And after that round, you've lost $1 million.
I've lost $1 million. I thought you said well done.
Yes, well done. You've only lost $1 million. That's an extraordinary performance, Roger.
I've only lost $1 million.
Very well done.
And that's quite good, is it?
Oh, it's excellent.
Sell everything immediately. Quickly.
So, it'd be funny if it wasn't really true, wouldn't it? I mean, it's an Irish way of doing things. We can laugh at this sort of thing, but unfortunately, that is what's going on. I mean, and this is what happens when you have unelected bankers running Europe and now running Ireland. These people run Ireland. You've seen what they're like. They're unelected faces. They're corporate bodies who come in here and basically just want to rape and pillage. That's what they're doing. So the next time you see an eviction or anyone threatening eviction or banks threatening to do anything, look at what's behind what they're doing. Look at the mess that they caused. And they caused the mess. Be under no illusion about this. They caused this mess. And who's the ones paying for it? Families, Irish families are paying for it. Through their taxes and everything else. And not only that, if you can't afford your mortgage, they will then drag you out of your house while your taxes still bail these guys out. It's astonishing. I mean, you just cannot believe what's going on. So, what's the solutions to this? Well, the solutions is that we have to get up and really do something as Irish people. And I mean as Irish people, not as Irish corporations or anything like that. The sovereign people of Ireland have to do something back. Now, myself and Johnny have a court case going on at the minute in the High Court, where on a number of issues we have the government in court. We're bringing in Brainbox Noonan that you see in there, and Enda Kenny. We have both of them in court, and we're working on our statement of claim at the minute. But basically what we're claiming is a number of issues. First of all, when you realise what went on in the banking world and the serious crimes that took place, and remember, the regulator, let me just talk about this guy for a minute. When the proverbial hit the fan, what did Irish people do with this regulator? Now, if he was in America, he would have got jail. Anybody know what we did? We gave him 600,000. We gave him a bonus. 600,000. Now, these people living in the real world. 600,000. Does anybody know who the regulator now is? Who is it? Elderfield. Yeah. Do you know who he is? He's the regulator that was in England when Northern Rock went to the wall. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. That's like building a ship, and I'm saying to you, who should we get to drive it? And somebody suggests the Italian guy that hit the rocks, and somebody else suggests the Titanic captain. I mean, you just couldn't make this stuff up. But they're all in a clique together. I don't know if you know in UniCredit, when he reported default, and they just said, oh, put it down as a systems error. That guy was a Goldman Sachs guy. And he's now on the board of the Central Bank of Ireland. He was appointed on, what day was he appointed? The 23rd of December, just gone. He was appointed onto the board of the Central Bank. And the reason being, they advertised it on the 23rd, so it's 2 days before Christmas, so nobody noticed, nobody cares. And probably most people wouldn't even know who he was anyway. And this is the same guy, you know, who deals with Hoonihan, that said we should be more tougher on evictions. That's what this guy said, we should be tougher on evictions. So these guys just don't live in the real world. They're from corporations that has this country destroyed. These are the corporations from Europe that don't really know Ireland, that tell you can't cut turf and stuff like this. I mean, one of these guys wouldn't know turf if you hit him on the head with it, you know? So the solution is that Irish people have to stand up and really go for a change of government. I mean, I haven't voted since I was 21, and there's a reason for it, because this is the sort of nonsense you get, and you either get annoyed with it or just stop playing that game with them. You know, I would love to see the day where maybe nobody goes out and votes, and then see what they do. But that's really not going to maybe affect change. So we have to do it ourselves. And Raymond Whitehead came to me a while ago and suggested a political party. And when he suggested that to me, who hasn't voted since I was 21, and the idea of politics actually gives me a lump in my throat that I'm about to just vomit, you know. The idea of politics, because that's what I showed you as I see politics. And I think most Irish people, in general, see that as politics. And I'm not saying all politicians are corrupt, but that's politics in Ireland, and has been since I was in my early 20s. That's politics in this country. And we accept it, because, like, if I say to anyone, oh, that politician lied, everybody would laugh, because they say, well, sure, that's what they do. So when he approached me about a political party, you can imagine what my reaction was. And after a while, you know, he used to bother me with phone calls. I don't mind saying that to him now, as he's looking at me. But he would be talking to me on the phone about politics, and I would be like this to Johnny. Is that guy Ray on again? Yeah, no problem, Ray. Yeah, oh yeah, politics, very interesting, Ray, yeah, you know. And that's genuinely what we were doing. But then, I suppose through time I listened to him. He maybe got me on a good day and I actually listened. And he talked about a thing called direct democracy. And when he told me we had it in our first constitution in 1922, am I right? Yeah, 1922. We had direct democracy in our first constitution. And these guys that you've seen here, their forefathers in Fine Gael, took it out without referendum. They just took it out. Now at the time, Ray will talk more about it, but at the time they could suspend it, I think for 6 to 8 years or something like that. But anyway, what was it? Maybe 20. Oh no, they did that, but in the period, wasn't it 6, and then they extended it for another... 2 years, and then to 8 years. Yeah, 2 years, and then another 6 years to 8 years, and then when nobody was looking, they just left it out. And when they brought in our new constitution, they said the government retained the right of referendum. But you see, they didn't have it to retain in the first place. But that's the sort of con job they always do with Irish people. Now, what direct democracy is basically a safe mechanism for Irish people. Our forefathers, so my father and grandfather, were much smarter people than we maybe gave them credit for. Because they seen this thing of direct democracy. They were used to English banks coming here and dragging people out of their homes. They had already gone through that. They were used to it. We're almost back there now. Just because we have internet and broadband and maybe nice cars, but we're still back that today. Like Allsops, this English crowd that I protest every time they have an auction in this place, they're the same English people that come here, and I'm not against English people, but they're the same, crown invested corporations that come here, do this sort of criminal activity, ask you all to pay for it, and then drag you out of your home when they don't want. So our forefathers put in this thing called direct democracy to make sure elected officials in this country stood by their word and protected the people. So they took direct democracy out really quickly because they knew that was the key issue. And basically what direct democracy was is that you had the right to call a referendum. If you felt strongly enough about something, you could get 75,000 votes and call a referendum on literally anything. Now, it didn't matter what it was, because if you wanted to be crazy and say, you pay 100% taxes in your wages and I'm going to call a referendum on it, well, the chance of me getting 75,000 votes for that is going to be slim. Never mind get it actually then to pass in referendum. So it actually acts like a policeman for the government. So now you could imagine the scenario during the night when our government decided to bail out the bondholders. You can imagine in that room when the Troika, who let's be honest now, these are the main players in these banks. They're unelected people. And their only interest is screwing people out of their money. That's their only interest. So you can imagine the scenario in that room when the government said, okay, we'll bail you out. But there's only one problem. Irish people have got a thing called direct democracy. And what that is that we can agree to bail you out, but I know within a couple of days they're going to call a referendum. And it'll be voted no. And then your problem is going to be, you're going to have to come up with a better plan. So what direct democracy does is, it makes them come up with the better plan first. It makes them actually do their work and put the interests of Irish people first. Instead of brushing Irish people's interests aside for the will of these banking corporations. So I leave you, because Ray will talk more about direct democracy. Thanks very much for listening. I hope it didn't upset too many people. But we need to wake up just to what's going on, and we have to do something. We can't just keep sitting and complaining about it. So we just have to get involved and do something. So I think, who's coming next?
Claire, do you want to take questions then?
Yeah, I'll take a few questions. Yeah, if anyone has one. Don't be shy. Anybody? Yeah, good.
If I took this out and I'm speaking with an English accent.
That's okay. I'm not against English at all, as you know.
If they took this
direct democracy
out of the Constitution, that was illegal, yes?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is it now gone past the time when we could really screw them?
Unfortunately, it probably is. But I mean, we will. As I say, we have. When we brought the court case against the government, right? So you got to imagine the scenario. My forefathers, say, if you like, from here, had put in a mechanism that an unemployed electrician and an unemployed plasterer should not have to try go to a high court to fight their government to try look after the interests of Irish people. 1 in 4 Irish people are going to bed hungry. 1 in 4. There's now set up groups, because we go around talking around the country, they now have groups called Suicide Watch. They used to have a thing called Neighbourhood Watch. They have a thing called Suicide Watch. There's 4 suicides a day in this country now. We had a woman ring us today, almost suicidal. Her husband was getting the gun, shooting her and shooting him. She had to leave the house because of banks, because of what they're doing. I had another woman who came to me and said, if it wasn't for the 2 packets of sausages she had in her fridge, she would not have been able to feed her children. but she paid her mortgage. And I thought to myself, see, this is what they thrive on. Irish people in general are honourable people. You know, in general, we are honourable people. If we have a bill to pay, we'll pay it. And when you think that that's what they thrive on, this woman's honour, she would have been too ashamed for her neighbours or anyone else to find out she couldn't pay her mortgage. And that's the way a lot of people are in this country. And that's the biggest, I suppose, stick that the bank have. It's the biggest tool in their arsenal against us, is that we're proud people who want to pay our way. What that woman should have done was went out and spent every last penny and made sure she had plenty of food, Sky Television on, heating paid, ESB paid, pay her smokes, and whatever she had left, keep it in her pocket and send in a tenner for her mortgage. That's what she should have done. Because when you see what these cowboys did, and then that her children are living on, you know, old processed sausages, that's all. That's what we're doing to our children as Irish people. I mean, that's a disgrace. Our children will not thank us for what we did. You know, they just won't thank us. Our forefathers must be turning in their graves. I mean, they've left us with this power, and we've blindly watched it go by. And we vote in a government, and we've European banks coming here telling us what to do. Now, when you see what they've done, how dare they come here and tell us what to do? They should be dragged out of these banks themselves. I mean, I think it was Max Kaiser was on Vincent Brown one night, and he said, Vincent Brown said, well, Max, what's the answer? He said, it's simple, you just take the bankers out and shoot them. Now, while I don't think that's a great idea, I would much prefer to see, and I would sleep much better at night, if I seen bankers being dragged from their home and the sheriff coming. You know, and I don't mean just ordinary local bank managers. You know the level I'm talking about. The guys doing 5 billion a day that they didn't have. That's why we're in trouble. Not because the local bank manager gave some farmer a loan for a tractor down the road and, you know, it was iffy whether he could really pay for it or not. I mean, that's not the problem and never was. You know, did you have another question?
Well, I'm just saying, looking back in history, they're called absentee landlords.
Yes. Well, that's what we'll all be again. I mean, it's very easy for the European central banks to do this. And like, if it was a plan, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I mean, it's very easy to have us all tenants on the land again. Because you give out cheap money, inflate the price of everything, and when everybody's got it, drop it and pull it back. Now you own everything. But just say, for instance, in Ireland, or in the world, let's say nobody could pay, and the banks took everything back. How did the banks get to own everything? Where did they get the money to own everything? See, it's fraud. I mean, I was telling the guy the other day about the £10 sterling, because you'd be used to this. On the £10 sterling, it says, I promise to pay the bearer of £10 sterling. Because sterling was backed up by sterling silver. Okay? So this guy was telling me he went to the central bank in England just to see was a fraud. And he said, here, I have an IOU that says you're willing to pay the bearer of £10 of silver. So we thought, silver's at a good price now. I think it's $30-something a troy ounce. So we thought £10 of silver would be terrific. So we went into the bank and said, there you go. That's the IOU, promise to pay £10 silver. Can I have my £10 silver? He said, oh no. No, you can't have that. He said, why not? He said, all we give is IOUs. You can have another £10, I'll give it to you in 2 fivers. But that's all you can get. So the banking is all fraud. And they rely on us this way. Now, you know the euro doesn't say anything like that. And anybody who has a euro, you should really take it out, because this is the fun part. You know, it doesn't say promise to pay. It doesn't say legal tender. The only thing these promissory notes or IOUs need is a signature. I'm not sure if you heard that. And all the euro notes are signed by a guy called Joe. Did you know that? Seriously, yeah, if you have a look at any note, just take one out and have a look, and you'll see. The very front, it's signed by Joe on any of the notes, and that's it. It's monopoly money, it's Mickey Mouse money. That's all it is. The criminals I don't like now.
Yeah, we broke the law, we're proud of it. We did a decent thing for our country.
Yeah, good on us.
Very quickly, just to think, the clip there she showed of Leo Varadkar and
yes.
little Brian Hayes, I don't mean little in a sense, I just think, you know, this little public schoolboy image she has sometimes really gets to me. But see the two of them sniggering.
Yes, I found that very disturbing.
And yeah, when they obviously are aware the camera is on them, they change and they put on this real serious look.
Yeah.
I think that shows the contempt to which
I,
they hold.
I will say, in fairness to them, before, maybe it's a little harsh looking back now, seeing them sniggering, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. When we look now, it's infuriating. And you can imagine, like, families being dragged out of their homes because of this. Like the guy that I met in Monaghan, and I shook his hands, and one of these guys, little hard hands, and he worked hard all his life. And, he came to me in such a panic. It was about 10 o'clock one evening, and he said, Ben, I'm after getting a notice that I have to be out of my house, but they're after giving me a 6-month stay. And I said, oh, that was very decent of the bank. They're giving you a 6-month stay. And I said to him, did you go to court? And he said, Ben, look, I've never been in court in my life. He said, maybe for a parking ticket in the local district court, and even at that I was nervous. He said, for me to stand up in the High Court and defend myself, he said, what's the point? I would have no chance. I wouldn't even be able to talk. And then the more I thought about that, I said to myself, this is a guy who's worked all his life. His taxes have paid for these sniggering buffoons that you're talking about. His taxes pay for them. His taxes are also paying so these guys can still fart through silk, these bankers, right, who took gambles on the stock exchange and lost, and now his taxes are bailing them out, right? And this guy's losing his home. And then the more I actually tried to think about this, and I was saying to myself, this guy is afforded nothing from the state in legal fees or free legal aid. There's no free legal aid for anyone in this position. And then the more I thought about it, I said, so if a criminal goes over and robs a bank and drives up the road and gets stopped by the police, this man's taxes from Monaghan will also pay for solicitors and barristers for this bank robber as well. But when it comes to him in court, and he said, is there any free legal aid or anything? The answer is no. No free legal aid, no nothing. Right? He has to go to High Court on his own. And he spoke to his solicitor, and the solicitor said, if you come up with 25,000, you must come up with 25,000 and put it on the table, because the barrister will not represent you, because if you lose your house, the chance of you paying the bill is probably nil. So you must come up with the 25,000 first. And he said, if I had 25,000, I'd pay my mortgage for the next 2.5 years and see where the chips fall. But that's really what's going on. And our government, what are they doing about it? I mean, I think just in the paper the other day, I heard they saying, mortgages are getting bad. I mean, they seem to be so removed from what's going on in people's lives that I think they were a bit shocked by the household tax. They think this is some sort of just apathy to, I'm not paying that. They don't actually realise that some people just have not got the money. They're so far removed. They remind me when we were doing history years ago about the French royalty, when somebody said they haven't got bread to eat. And I said, well, let them eat cake. I mean, she was so far removed, she just thought it wasn't bread, it was that cake. And it makes me think of that, like when I see these people. But isn't it a disgrace where good Irish, hard working, Irish people built Europe. The roads, the underground in London, the Irish built this. We're good workers, and look what we've become in our own country. Peasants.
This is the Labour Party that are in power today. They were started in 1916 by James Connolly.
Of course. Yeah, which makes it more upsetting even. but it really, I think it must be the European banks, that are now running, and this is why it's most dangerous. When you have unelected banking officials running any country, even running anything, I wouldn't let them run anything. But to come in here to a sovereign state, a sovereign island, where they have basically plundered all our natural resources. Do you know who are the two most richest countries in Europe in natural resources? Ireland and who else? Greece. You couldn't make it up. Ireland and Greece. Two richest countries in natural resources. So our oil fields are gone, our gas fields are gone, mining is almost gone, but our fishing rights, the fishing rights, which would have us all out of a hole, gone. And our government is doing what about it? Nothing. We are stupid, right? So this is how we do it. That's why they say you find in contempt. We find you in contempt. See? They can't put you in contempt. They can't tell you you're in contempt. They have to find you there.
You must allow it.
Well, on Thursday morning, they'll definitely not find me there because I'm going to be somewhere else and highlight what we do, because it's to give people a little bit of courage to say, look, play them at the city game. The commercial courts, we live here in a common law jurisdiction. They're maritime courts. They're of the sea. That's why they have the master of the High Court. He's the master of the ship. That's why you're in the dock. See, it's all this game that you play. Once you know how to play it, it can be quite fun. So imagine LaFoy's face after we slagged her off on the video, and she says, now where are they in contempt? I can't find them in contempt. I can't find them at all. So the problem with this is then the problem with this is then the Gardaí are going to arrive down, because she'll give them some order. And now they're acting as policy enforcers. We don't have policy enforcers in this country, but because the guards don't know their job, they think when a judge gives an order, they have to do it. See, they have everyone fooled into this game. Right? Now, I'm not talking about criminality. That's a different thing. That's common law, right? So this is just maritime law. So they're going to send the guards down, and luckily enough, this man lives in a house where there's security gates and an intercom. So we have tried to explain to them as best we can, because we don't know when the guards are going to call. So what we've said to them is, when the guards ring the buzzer, just say hello, and they say, a warrant for your arrest. So that's terrific. Is it civil or criminal? And that always stumps them, because they don't know. And they should know. See, if they're doing the job, they should know the difference. Because if it's civil, there has to be a contract. And we didn't recall signing any such contract. See? I mean, when the judge won't sign our order, we're not going to sign a contract, right? So we say civil or criminal. If they say civil, well, what are the guards doing involved? They shouldn't be involved in any civil matter. You hear them every time on the receiver video. They do know that. Now if they say it's criminal, well, if it's criminal, somebody has to make a complaint against you. So who's made the complaint? The judge. Okay, I'll accept that. Judge has made a complaint. I'll go and speak to a judge. Are they bringing me to the judge that made the complaint? That couldn't be fair, could it? She's making the complaint and she's the judge who's going to decide whether she's right or wrong. We won't be having that either. So we try to mess with them as they try to mess with us. And the more you become a pain in the arse to these people, the more it highlights, you know, what's going on. If they were really interested in justice, they should have had the banks in jail. You know, we went to one of the courts because one of the chaps was in against Anglo-Irish. And when we were in the court, we said to the judge, does the judge recognise there's a serious law in the court called the liquidity law? And he said yes. And we said it's serious. And we spoke about 5 years in jail and blah, blah. And he said, look, I get the point, it's a serious law. Right? Now remember, they used to have a high-powered barrister team over this side, and this man has an unemployed electrician. And they don't let me speak. See? Because they're afraid. I'm not allowed to talk. Yet the bank can pay people to talk, but we're not allowed to talk in their court because you have to go in and play by their rules. We normally try not to do that, but we play the game. Because in their equity courts, you know, there's a clean hands rule. Did you ever hear this? You can't come to court with dirty hands. It'd be similar if me and Johnny robbed the bank and he didn't give me my cut. What chance do you think I'd have of getting my money if I brought him to court? See, none, because it's a dirty hands rule. Clean hands. You must have clean hands in court. So when we showed the serious law that Anglo-Irish broke, okay, 5 years in prison, they're criminals. Not only that, we did research on the legal team over the far side and we pulled out their lovely colour brochure that they advertised their services. Turns out they're experts in banking compliance. So we said, hey, they're experts in banking compliance. They know it's a law and a serious law, just in case you don't, Judge. So he's going berserk at this stage. And then we said, of course, you're aware of the clean hands rule. And the minute we said that, he started fighting the case, the judge. The other side never mentioned the word. They never mentioned it. They never mentioned one word in the whole court. So me and Eugene are fighting away. And Eugene then says to them, are you telling me this court is supporting criminal activity? And the judge says, say that one more time, we'll hold you in contempt. And I looked to Eugene, and all I could see was Eugene's arse. He's down like that. And he's packing his bag. And the two of us just walked out of the court. And the judge, as he was looking, he raised and he looked over and he looked down and he realised we were actually packing up and going home. So we left. And there was a few people left in the court. And we said, what happened when we left? He said, the barrister eventually spoke. Do you know what he said? and costs, Your Honour. That's true. That is really true. And that's what goes on. So that's in order now this guy has for receivers to come and take lovely farmland and horses and everything around Kildare. And you see what they were doing. So that's why we play these games, just in case anybody thinks like I'm just trying to be a pain in the arse for the idea. I mean, I probably am a pain in the arse, but it's what we try to highlight. Sorry.
Yeah, I have to say one thing, you should hold classes. I think a lot of people here have learned more in a few minutes.
Yeah,
you know,
that has been suggested to me before, and I really think maybe I should, because at a lot of meetings it is suggested of what to do and how to avoid court and the pitfalls that we all fall into, because the minute you get a court paper, like I'll give you an example with eFlow. I do mess with this just to improve myself, but I'm not suggesting anybody doesn't pay eFlow. Wink, wink. But if you consider eFlow, right? eFlow sent me a load of bills, and I said, I will pay these bills once you verify and document the obligation. Did you ever hear that term? Verify and document the obligation. That's a term you should really use. Because in any contract, if somebody's looking for me, money from me, they should verify and document the obligation. In other words, if you did work for me, to verify and document the obligation, it's just an invoice. Just stating what you did, and I'll agree, and I'll pay you the money. But as a sovereign person, in the Constitution, I have the right to travel free around. If you don't believe me, look on the cover of your passport even. You'll say this man's an Irish citizen. Help him on his way even. Okay? So, they sent me bills, and I sent back saying, dear sir, I'm a sovereign. If you can verify and document the obligation that somehow you had a referendum, own a road in Ireland somewhere, and you think I owe you money, that's fine, send me an invoice and I'll take care of it straight away. But instead they sent me to Pearson Fitzgibbon, sorry? Yeah, oh yeah, he's in Kerrison. Yeah, no, but he wrote to me and he said, you owe these people money. And I wrote back and said, who are you? And he wrote back and said, we're the solicitors for eFlow and you owe them money. And I wrote back and said, what business is it of yours? Because I said, if I had a contract with eFlow, which I don't, but if I did, I said, you're a solicitor and you know privity of contract. And you're sticking your nose into a contract when you know that's illegal. So butt out. And then he sent me a summons with draft on it. So I sent back a counterclaim with draft on it. And I haven't heard anything since because he thinks I'm a smart arse. But I think it is important maybe to do a course just on your rights, because they don't want you to know what your rights are. And there's one thing I'm against. I'm not anarchist, by the way. I'm genuinely not. I haven't voted since I was 21, but I'm not into anarchy. And if I see someone decent, I'll vote for them. But I'm not anarchist. I think we should pay our way. But when they're actually screwing us, I stop, and I don't tell anybody to do that. And so, but what I am against is Irish people's rights being eroded. I'm hugely against that, and I'm all for rights. And you'll see that even on any of the videos, I try to be respectful, but all I'm looking for is our rights. There's nothing wrong with that.
Can I just say a quick thing, Ben? Just like they said at the start there, we can arrange for more people to come down and do things like that, the English classes and further talks.
Yeah, if you'd like a common law course or a little course on law, just basic stuff that'll help you, it's quite good. And if anybody's in trouble with mortgages and stuff like that, we have wonderful letters that we send off. I mean, we were in court and we sacked the receiver, right? Does most people know who the receiver works for? I think if you watch the receiver video, it explains that the receiver does not work for the bank. So if the bank sends receivers in on me, the receiver works for me. Did you know that? Most solicitors don't know that. I spoke to 4 solicitors and 1 barrister and thought it was crazy until I produced the Act for them. It's the 1881 Act, by the way. You won't find it on Irish statute book. You have to go to the UK government for it. And it's on there. 1881. And if you look it up, I think it's section 108. But I can do a course on this sort of stuff anyway. But it's 108 and you'll see that the bank appoint the receiver. Now, to appoint in law means to do that. That's appoint, right? And that's all that means. But after that, he is an agent of the mortgagor. And the reason they did that was just pure greed. It wasn't for anything else. Because if he's sent as an agent to me, I'm responsible for his transgressions, and I'm responsible for his defaults. See, because a lot of people come to me and they say, Ben, the receiver's in, he's after doing this and he did that, and I'm going to sue him. And I said, well, what would you be suing him for? He works for you, and you're responsible for his transgressions. That wouldn't make sense in a court. But he does have an equitable duty of care to you. So why not ask him a load of questions? So we sent him questions. He didn't answer any, so we sacked him. And when we went into court in front of Lafoy, that's this nonsense that's going on tomorrow. We went in front of Lafoy, and the barrister stood up and he said, "This will only take 5 minutes, Your Honour." And I went to Jerry, he's cocky, isn't he? See? So he stands up and said, "Wait till you hear, Your Honour, they sacked the receiver." And she goes, like this, you know. So I got Jerry. Jerry stood up and said, "That's right, Your Honour, no duty of care." See? Then the laughing stopped. Then the case went on for 2 hours. And we brought in Medford versus Blake, a pig farmer. This pig farmer in the UK, he's a great guy. Receivers came in, and the receivers ran the business. Now that's their choice if they wish to do that. But he had a duty of care. And they paid the wrong price for pig meal. They were paying it too dear. Because the farmer knew how to... Because he was a worker, you see, not like bankers. See, they wouldn't have a clue. So they were paying top dollar for pig feed. See? So he sued them and he won in the High Court. Right? And the receivers brought him to the Supreme Court in London. And they upheld the case to say he had a duty of care and they did it wrong and he won his case. Right? So we brought that case into court. Because you know anything that happens in England, because the bar is them, no disrespect to you, you're not the bar, you're good people. No, I genuinely mean that, you know I mean that. I know, but English people are lovely people. I'm not saying this is a different thing. This is corporate. You know, corporate Ireland isn't great either. You've seen them guys, right? So they have a duty of care. So, you know, we sacked the receivers because they didn't perform on a duty of care. And all of a sudden, Judge Lafoy starts handling the case. Because these barristers are out of their depth when they meet us. Because we don't play by the rules. See, we're not part of the tennis club. So it turns out I arrive with a hurley stick because I can hit the ball better with that. And they say, "Oh, that's not playing by the rules." And I'd say, "Well, show me in the tennis rule where it says you can't bring a hurley." See, it doesn't say it, so I bring it. And that's what we do in court. So Lafoy fought the case and she talked about a tri-party agreement. Just in case you were wondering about on the video, I'm on about a tri-party agreement. The tri-party agreement that she's talking about is a contract, supposedly non-existent, between the bank and you. And in the small print in that, imagine even small print being allowed anyway, when a contract is supposed to be open and transparent. But anyway, so in the contract, there is an appointment of a receiver. And we're saying, look, even if there's a tri-party agreement, show it to us, we're happy. See, there's not one. They just make it up as they go along. So even if she, you know, Jerry caves in with the police or whatever, and we obey the order, the next thing we'll do is we'll conditionally accept the order, provided Judge Lafoy shows us the contract. That's only fair. Conditional acceptance. It's beautiful because you're accepting it. With conditions, of course. Sorry, you.
Just want to refer to your earlier statement about the toll there, just as
Yeah.
a matter of interest, and you said about being sovereign. Did you send off a memorandum of understanding, or did you just make a decision to be a sovereign person, or do you have to?
Well, you see, we're all sovereign, and they have to prove we're not. See, I just say I'm one of the people. That means I'm sovereign. Because if you look at see, it's the preamble of the Constitution you really want to be looking at, not what's in the Constitution. Because the preamble says, we the people gave the Constitution. See, so if you're one of the people, you're not one of the citizens. See, you don't want to be a citizen. See, a citizen is the lower rank. See, if you're the people...
So, like I'm unemployed at the moment, and it's not something I'm happy about and working towards getting off that. That basically doesn't allow me to be sovereign because I'm
No, of course. You see, a lot of people are under the impression because the government is giving you dole or whatever, you can't be sovereign. No, that's a benefit. So you're sovereign. So your servants, that's why they're called civil servants and public servants, your servants are now coming to you to give you a benefit because you're sovereign. So go on with your head held high and take your money. But when they try to charge you on the road, now they're trying to be Dick Turpin.
That's what I mean, and it's like it's really it's criminal really. They can just pull up this, you know, and you cannot pass here without paying.
But yeah, the only thing is, it is offered to contract. I mean, Now, I know where they put the barrier down, that could be awkward. I mean, when eFlow stop annoying me, I might now tell them to send me a free tag. Or, when I go on the M3 at 6 o'clock, I will hold up all the traffic till they eventually open it up for me. And we can have a hullabaloo every day there if they want to do that, or they give me a free tag. We could do that, there's no problem.
Because we try it out anyway for the crack, you know, because we're asking questions now about everything.
Yeah.
And we tried it out for the crack, and like you say, got a big threatening letter back saying about the solicitor you mentioned. But like we said to them, we're happy to honour the contract. So we were in dialogue with them straight away, but from the €12 they still put it up to €96, even though we were trying to honour the contract.
Yeah.
So
you see,
put it up anyway.
But if I thought people were going to pay here, I would charge you €100 out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you wrote back to me, I'll charge you 200 because I think I have you.
Do you know what I mean?
But if you write back saying, verify the obligation, document and verify it, and if I sign the contract, I'll pay it.
They sent us back pictures of the car. You can see us in the car, you know, going through
yeah.
the hall.
I went through it 21 times, right? At a €3 pop, which was about €63. And I hadn't paid it, but they kept running it up, right? And eventually they got a court order for 2,900. You know, from the 63. But I wrote to them and said, listen, I don't have a problem. I'll pay you the €63. That's what I owe you. So I'm not paying you anything else above that. I said because
you were in dialogue with them, or such? Or?
No, because that's all it was. That's all I felt I should pay them, you know. But I also did. But what I said to them was, I trademarked my name out. I said, if you wanted a contract with me, I said, you use my trademark name. You send me on €1,000 for every time you post the acting. And that was it. I heard no more than it.
That's fair. I'll tell you what happened myself and Johnny, a funny thing, just to give you an idea. And when you actually start playing the game, do it on small stuff first till you learn, you know. And if you feel that you're getting out of your debt, well then just offer something, you know. So myself and Johnny come out of the court after trying to help someone.
Yeah.
Typical me and Johnny, didn't have a penny in our pockets, right? We barely had enough to put in the parking meter, and we were helping the man try keeping us home. And when we came out, there was a big clamp on Johnny's car. And I said, geez, Johnny, what are we going to do? Have you any money? Johnny says, no, but I have a cheque. The solicitor had given him a cheque. Where it is. The solicitor gave him a cheque, said, Johnny, will you help these people that are in trouble? I can't be seen to be doing what you fucking do, but would you do it? And he said, there's a cheque. So Johnny said, yeah, no problem, €150, yeah. Now, we'd help them anyway, but it was nice to get the €150. But we didn't have a washer, right? So the clamper comes, and he's a nice guy, and he said, hey, I know you from YouTube. And I said, oh, yeah, how's things? And he goes, see, you're clamped. And I said, yeah. I said, you can do for us. He said, I'm only working here, mate. If I could, I'd take it off. But he said, I just was caught on the camera because you two guys were down messing at it, you see? And we said, look, we have a cheque. Will you take that? It's made out for, was it 100?
Video?
Yeah, we videoed it now. It's €150. Will you take that and you can keep the change? And he said, I'll make a phone call and see. So he rang up and they said no. And I said, tell them it's a solicitor cheque and they can ring the solicitor to see if it's a bona fide cheque and they can still keep the change. They wouldn't do it. And I said, well, there's nothing more we can do for you then. So,
promissory note?
Yeah, oh yeah, we offered him a promissory note. He didn't have to phone up for that one, right? So, Johnny was able to push the car over the first part of the chain. Now, you know the way the chain is wrapped around, I'm not very mechanical, what's that?
The wheel.
See, I'm an electrician. You're dead on the way home. No, I think it's the suspension or something, isn't it? But, yeah, so we managed to roll it over the first part of the chain, which loosened it. You see, we had a load of play. So being an electrician, Johnny got it under and I went off and bought cable ties. So we're cable tying it up. Because we realised we could cable tie the whole thing up and drive home. Right? So what happened was, they arrived in a big, what do you call them? The big truck for lifting the car to take us away. See, because they're watching us outside the forecourts on the cameras. So because myself and Johnny know a little bit about the law, we got in the car, reclined the seats. Snoring. No, he came along later. We were snoring, you see. And of course he's sitting here blocking traffic. So I knew we'd nowhere to go. So he's waiting there and eventually they have to drive off. But they got the police. And the police come. And normally I get on okay with the police, but this guy was... Jesus Christ. I mean, talk about being tall enough, he was definitely thick enough. He comes. This guy arrives and he goes, who's interfering with the clamp? I said, I don't know. He says it's an offence to interfere with a clamp. So of course, me being the smart arse, I couldn't leave it alone. I said, could you legally define interfere? I know a man who's done for interfering with a child. So what's the legal definition of interfere with a clamp? And he said, oh, we have a smart arse. He said to Johnny, what's your name? And he starts reading him your rights. You know, you have the right to remain silent and such as. But when he got to the end, he didn't ask him if he understood. So I said to the guard, you're supposed to ask him if he understood. And he said, what? I said, you're supposed to ask my friend if he understood your caution, because I know he doesn't. See? So we said, look, it's a civil matter. We've offered payment. If there's nothing else, we'll be soon on our way, guard. So we're tying it up. He said, if you drive off with that, he said, I'll do you for theft. I said, do you know much about larceny? And of course, again, he doesn't like a smart arse. What? I said, do you know much about larceny? Because to prove larceny, you have a number of things to prove. And one of them is that at no time was payment offered. Another thing is that we're going to permanently deprive the owner of the object. And I said, thirdly, they've attached their product to our motor and we're asking them to take it back. I said, if you think you can get theft with that in the court, well, good luck with that, right? So then he thinks for a minute and goes, I'll do you for dangerous driving. I said, you'll do us for dangerous driving standing on a footpath? I said, are you seeing into the future? So he just looks at me and storms off. Right? And myself and Johnny got in the car and just drove off, and we were roaring laughing. So a couple of days later, we phoned up the clampers and we recorded the call, because we're going to put this up on YouTube just for a bit of laugh. It's just to show people, have a bit of laugh, learn the law. So we phoned up the clampers and we said, would you remove a clamp for us, please? The man goes, well, what's the reg? Gave him the reg. Where's the car? Said, Kells, County Meath. Just a moment. We don't do Kells. I said, would it help if I told you you put it on an Innish key? Who took the clamp off? I said, no one. I said, we're asking you, will you remove it? And he goes, you know there's a big fine for moving that clamp. I said, we didn't. It's still on the car. Do you want to remove it or not? And he goes, no, we don't do Kells. And I said, that's okay. We'll remove it ourselves then. And he said, well, it's a €500 fine for that. And I said, well, good luck with that. And I said, furthermore, we're now charging you 200 a day for storage. So this is 3 days. This is 3 days. My reckoning, €500. Okay, you owe me 100. So if you get down today, it's 100. If you go tomorrow, it's 200. So for the skate, he just hung up on me, right? But for the skate, we were going to put it in the post and do return post, because the weight of this bloody thing. so we might do that. But sorry folks, I know we went a little bit off. Yeah.
Sorry, just because we're talking about solutions.
Yes.
Yeah. And like I'm educating myself at the moment using books and the internet.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't want to offend anybody here by saying this, but we are talking about solutions.
Yes.
And as far as I can see, the Irish ancient heritage, our ancient Breton law system and all this was a very, very fair and just system. And the Irish people were very, very caring and intelligent people. Yeah. And from what I can see, reading into the history of this, it was Catholicism that is really responsible for a lot of problems in Ireland. And I've heard horrific tales from my grandmother, my mother and my father about the Christian brothers and the belittlement and the molestation and the putting people down and taking away their knowledge and taking away their power.
Of course, you see, they want to keep you ignorant. That's the whole point of us doing the talk. So, and I know we have a bit of laugh just to keep it light-hearted, because, you know, you could keep so serious with this stuff, you'd be stringing yourself up. But you're right, and we were always taught in this country to, you know, respect the institutions, right? But look at all the institutions and what they've done to us. The church, the courts, the banking, government, every one of them has literally screwed us. Every one of them. And, you know, we're still told to, pay our way and do this sort of nonsense. So that's why I have fun with them now. But I understand a lot of people aren't at the fun stage. And it can be quite fun when you know what you're doing. You can have a lot of laugh with it, but I understand it's very serious for a lot of people.
I just want to say one more thing then. There's a beautiful documentary about the Irish Breton law history by a guy called Paddy Flannery on YouTube. And people look at him. It's very, very educational.
Yeah.
And just Mark Stevens is another American guy, if you want to try to get
Yeah, I do speak to Mark Stevens quite a lot. He got me on the show when he seen the sheriff thing. Yeah, he's a good guy. He sent me over his book. What is it called? Mark Stevens' book, something into legal land or something like that. Yeah, Ventures into Legal Land. It's very good. He does funny stuff as well. He phones up the people. He doesn't pay anyone, that guy. He doesn't pay taxes or anything.
The Brett Law documentary is very inspiring, and it fills that void
Yeah.
where you think, you know, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Where
Now, having said that, a lot of Brehon law could be harsh as well.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of good points that we could use in modern day. But common law is quite good as well. I mean, Brehon law, you know, in Brehon law, if you were to divide a farm, say, between 5 people, the way Brehon law worked was, they said to the youngest, if he was over 18, you have to divide the farm, but you will get the last pick. Because now you'll see the best divided farm ever, because you're going to get the last pick. Do you know what I mean? So say, it's like saying today with a kid, say you've only one Mars bar and you have 2 kids, and you say, you have the Mars bar, and you get the first pick. Now you'll see the most finely divided Mars bar you're ever going to see. That's a lot of what...
Well, sorry, I didn't mean Brett Law. It goes into just Irish history and how we used to treat each other.
Look, common law is a terrific law. There's nothing wrong with it. It served us a long time. It comes from the 10 Commandments and down, and it served us for that long. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
People want questions on people want questions. Ask the people, do they want any questions on mortgages?
Sorry, it was only one, and I'm sorry to mention banks again, but
yes.
In response to that question there about how they create money.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if it's happening here yet, but I read that at least 2 American banks invented money and then bought government bonds with it. In other words, with money they never had in the first place, they were then obliging the taxpayer for years to come to pay the interest.
Of course.
Back.
Well, you know that...
it has to be one of the most outrageous countries.
Yeah. Well, there's some very famous sayings by bankers. Like one of the bankers, I think it was a Rothschild, who said, I care not who runs the country, so long as I run the bank. I mean, I would say the same thing. I would say, look, don't vote for me, but let me run the bank. The whole idea of a corporation of private people creating money and giving it to a government and charging them interest on it is crazy. And that's why, you know, usury, what they call in the Arab states, and that usury is not allowed in their religion even, because usury, by its very nature, is fraud. So in other words, just to give you a quick rundown, say there was only €1,000 in the world. There's only €1,000, and 10 people come to me for a €100 loan, and I give it out to them. The minute I charge usury, or interest, people have to default. See, it's fraud. People have to default. Did I tell you that? No, I just gave you the €100. I don't care which is default, because when you work for what it is you're working for, I'm still going to win. If you can't pay me back the money, I'm going to take your land. Now I have land, plus my 1,000 back from whoever I got it back from. And then I'll let it go again, and I'll charge interest again, and then I'll... So it defaults. If they've set up the system that there's defaulters, why are they giving out? Why are they giving out? They've set up the system for it to default. Folks, I'm getting time notices here. I'd say one last question.
I just want to say, see, that's what we consider money. That's what we consider money. But that is not what the banks consider money. The banks consider promissory notes money. Bonds money. They set up, as you have said, what they have done is they set up instruments, financial instruments, that they trade them as if they're money. But they can create them out of nothing. And if you go and look at the Bill of Exchange Act, you'll see it all under there. You know, and the judge in the famous case in England,
Lord Denning.
Lord Denning, tell them that story, and then we can.
Yeah. Lord Denning basically said any financial instrument is to be accepted for payment. So when we offered the IOU for the clan, that actually was payment. See, nothing wrong with it. All right. Sorry, there was one last question. I'll just go to it.
Before I answer the question, in relation to your direct democracy, which I think is absolutely essential, what you're presenting, have been presented for a minute, the whole idea that we need advice about specifically dealing with the existing circumstances is absolutely crucial. We certainly need that. What I'm working on with the bigger picture is to destroy all this.
Yes.
And the way we destroy all this is by people taking charge of themselves.
Yes.
The kind of direct democracy issue that you're talking about, referenda which people can call by signing petitions.
Absolutely.
That's the real way to go about it. Now here's 2 modern contemporary examples. One bad, one didn't work, one did. The last democratically elected Greek Prime Minister, George Papandreou, was dismissed from office last year by the Troika, by the banks, for the outrageous proposition that the Greek people should have a referendum on whether they accept the banking deal, right? And they then imposed Lucas Papademos, who's a fucking banker, as the Prime Minister, and he's still the Prime Minister despite the last election, right? So that's what they did in Greece. By contrast with that, in Iceland in 2009 and again in 2010, the people, through the exercise of a rarely, if ever used option to have referenda, forced their government twice not to bail out their foreign banking debts. And Iceland, a few years ago, people joked, banker types joked about what's the difference between Ireland and Iceland? One letter. Yeah. Right? And some of ours were saying the same sort of thing. Iceland now has 3% 4% unemployment and 3% growth.
Mm. Yeah, exactly.
That's the solution.
I don't know if anybody knows Nigel Farage from the UK Independent Party. We met him in Dublin the other day and he spoke to us for a good hour and a half and he gave us some good advice on that. But you should look at him on the video on YouTube where he's in the EU Commission in Brussels. It's fabulous. This is a UK party now, right? They came in with green jerseys, respect the Irish and respect their vote no. Because remember we voted no in Lisbon. Because he found it extraordinary that when they actually asked the people, what do you think about getting screwed over by the banks? And Ireland went, no. Went, are you sure? And we'll ask you again till you get the question right. I mean, that's democracy in this country. Look, I'll hand you over to Ray. He'll talk a little bit about direct democracy. Thanks very much.